Welcome back to PC-88 Paradise, the series where we take a close look at classic games for the NEC PC-88, the most popular Japanese PC series of the 1980s. While Enix was best known for the Dragon Quest series, on Japanese PCs in the 80s they had also made a name for themselves with their graphic adventure games. Today I want to talk about one minor hit that they released in 1987.
Oh, this isn't going to be about Jesus, is it?
All things are about Jesus, Homer.
And I should probably make clear up front that this game has very little to do with religion. It's actually a horror-themed space adventure, inspired primarily by Ridley Scott's Alien. And this game has actually come up before on the channel. Here's a quote from Hideo Kojima that I featured in my video on Snatcher.
I wanted to make an adventure game like the Portopia serial murder case, a game I was into during my college years. While planning out Snatcher, Enix put out another game titled Jesus. When I saw Jesus, I was convinced that I had to develop Snatcher for the PC-8801, or it wouldn't be good.
And yeah, even before all the commenters on that video pointed it out, I had already noticed the obvious joke here, that Kojima made Snatcher because he quote-unquote saw Jesus. At the time, I didn't want to derail that video by going there, but I guess now we can all have a good laugh. Yeah, Hideo Kojima became a devout Christian, and so he decided to make Snatcher, a horror-themed game about killer cyborgs. But in all seriousness, I think it will be interesting today to take a look at the game that made such a big impression on Kojima and see if we can pinpoint any obvious inspiration for Snatcher. And by the way, if you're interested in playing the game in English, there is a fan translation out there for the Famicom port that was released later. But today, let's take a look at the original PC-88 version. The art style on the cover looks very different from the graphics in the game. And on the back, they even included a photo of the main 5 staff members. Inside, the black and white manual has lots of cool illustrations from character designer Shintaro Majima, who has quite a few character design credits to his name, and not just from other Enix games. The game is stored on 3 floppy disks, and to start, we simply insert the first 2 of them. I'll also make sure to turn down my CPU speed, since the manual specifically says to use 4 MHz mode only. So first there's a menu to either start a new game or continue. Start a new game, and after the Enix logo, we're promptly thrown into a scene where a man is being chased by an alien. But surprise, it's just a video game. Our protagonist, Hayao Muso from Japan, is introduced to us as a dude who likes video games, but was selected for the game's mission thanks to his good grades in school. Here he was playing a game with his co-worker, Balkas, from Brazil, who also likes video games and hamburgers, which is constantly brought up in the game as his only other character trait. Have you ever noticed that in every 80s anime, the good-looking protagonist always has a dorky best friend who looks like this? So next we get the opening sequence, consisting of the credits played over the game's theme music, with a graphic of the space station Jesus, the home of our main characters. I don't know why the space station is named Jesus. According to English Wikipedia, it's supposed to be shaped like the double-edged sword from the Book of Revelation, but I think they're actually referring to one of the space ships that appears in the game.
Book of Revelations, fire-breathing lion's head, tail made out of snakes. Who else is it gonna be?
Jesus?
Jeez! Oh, don't you kids know anything?
A spaceship named Corona is probably the one that's supposed to look like a double-edged sword. So after the opening, Hayao is given his first task, which is to distribute ID cards to each of the crew members, a good opportunity to introduce the characters. So the first crew member I'll show is Hayao's girlfriend, Eileen, from France, a genius mathematician and pianist. She's listening to a new cassette tape. Interesting that they thought music would still be on cassette tapes in the future. But anyway, the tune on the tape is a short, upbeat version of the game's main theme, and I promise this tape will be important later. Next, let's visit the doctor named Hoka from China. Hoka is one hell of a flirt, and offers to teach Hayao bed manners, so he knows what to do with Aline later. This quick, naughty scene is one that was taken out for the Famicom version, to make it more family-friendly. The scene is promptly cut short, though, by an urgent medical call. Anyway, next let's go see Balkus, who's playing video games again. Here is kind of an Easter egg. It plays the overworld theme from Dragon Quest. This is because the music in Jesus was composed by the same person, Koichi Sugiyama. After giving the card to Balkus, if we come back here again, we'll meet Roger Carson from America, who is the crew's biologist. Next, there's Andre Bellini from Italy, the mission's computer scientist.
There walked upon the earth a man named Bellini, who lived in a one-bedroom apartment.
This is going to be the best Bellini day ever.
If we want, here we can play a mini-game called Space Monster, a simple arcade-like game where you have to climb upward. If you collect a star, you can eat the enemies, similar to Pac-Man. The remaining two characters are the ship captains, Wilhelm Heiler from Germany and Ivan Mirakov from the Soviet Union. Interesting also that they thought the USSR would still be around. After giving out all the ID cards, if we visit Aline again, we get a quick romantic scene here, since Aline is about to depart on a ship soon as part of their mission. And finally, Hayao is given his wearable computer assistant named Foji. The name is derived by taking the next letter in the alphabet from each of the letters in Enix. Foji surely must have served as part of the inspiration for the robot assistant in Snatcher, the Metal Gear Mark II. Similarly, Foji serves as the wisecracking comic relief throughout most of the game, and certainly I can already see a lot of other ways this game inspired Snatcher. It uses the same number pad-based command interface, makes funny noises for the character dialogue, and uses only incidental music here and there for the soundtrack. The atmosphere also feels really similar, and this should become more obvious once we get into the game. On the next screen, this is obviously supposed to be the Tokyo Metropolitan Government Building in Shinjuku, which is interesting since the building didn't exist yet when the game was released. Apparently the design had just recently been unveiled. This screen fills us in on the plot. The year is 2061, and the world has suddenly been hit by natural disasters everywhere, while Halley's Comet is about to finally pass near the Earth again. I'm going to pronounce it Halley's Comet, by the way, which may not be technically correct, but that's the way I remember everyone pronouncing it when I was young. Incidentally, the last time the comet passed Earth was in 1986, the year before the game was released, so I'm sure the comet was on a lot of people's minds at the time. So anyway, scientists want to collect gas samples from the comet's tail as it passes by this time, in hopes of obtaining evidence that life on Earth was brought here originally by a comet. All the characters I introduced earlier are on a mission to intercept the comet and collect samples. The mission's first ship, called the Comet, which Aline is aboard, has just collected its samples, but has ceased all contact shortly after. So Hayao is sent from the second ship, the Corona, on a shuttle to investigate. Hayao's investigation of the comet, along with his computer assistant Foji, constitutes the main section of the game. You arrive at the airlock on the 6th floor, and there are 5 circular floors to explore below. You use the keyboard to move your character forward or backward through the dark hallways, and these are also the only areas where you can save in the first half of the game. There's a single save slot on disk number 1, and as usual I used a backup disk for saving. In the hallways, you can enter the doors on the right. Some of them are locked and can only be opened using those ID cards that we distributed at the beginning of the game. Each member's card has access to different rooms, so as we find them, we'll gain access to new areas. At first, the lowest floor we can travel to is the 3rd, due to a gas leak on the 2nd floor. To access the 2 lowest floors, later on we can do a mini-game at the airlock where we close these valves in order to stop the gas from flowing from the left pipe to the right. But you can only close 4 valves. Can you see the solution? It took me a while. But anyway, we're going to get into spoilers here already, so feel free to skip to the time on screen if you need to. The first crew member I found on the Comet was Balkus, and I'm sure you could have guessed it, but he's dead. He has only a mysterious wound on the back of his neck. We take his ID card and move on. Next, in the computer room, we find laser discs. It calls these computer discs on the wall laser discs. More weird future predictions from Enix. Oh yeah, and we also find Bellini's body.
Bellini was a prophet.
And God was a ridiculous, stupid sham.
I took Bellini for granted.
According to the book, so did his landlord.
Bellini has left a dying message on the computer, though, for anyone who may find it. He says that after they recovered the gas samples from the comet, Balkas was analyzing them alone in the sample room. Later, when Bellini was watching the camera recordings from the room, he saw how Balkas was killed by a small, unknown creature, which then seemed to change shape. While Bellini was writing the message, a gelatinous goo started to ooze in through the doorway to the computer room, and he knew it was the creature. He managed to help Eileen, who was with him, to escape, but he decided to stay behind and try to fight the creature, and we can see the result of that decision.
Bellini just stood there.
I would have scuttled, hurried.
Yes, but you were not Bellini.
Sadly.
Yes.
But anyway, next we find Captain Hyler in the cockpit, who was apparently trying to defend the ship when he was killed. And in his bedroom, we also find a life form sensor, which shows the location of all life forms on the ship. But right now it shows nothing. Hayao despairs, thinking that this means Eileen is dead too. But there's still hope. Fuji informs him that this sensor can't detect people when they're asleep. And in the food storage room, we find crates of Coca-Cola. When Hayao asks who was planning on drinking all this cola, Fuji replies that it was probably Balkas, along with all those hamburgers he eats. But it's in the darkness behind the crates that we get our first face-to-face encounter with the creature. Here's one of the few parts in the game where you can get game over if you try to fight. What you actually need to do is just run away in order to progress the game. Only after doing that can we find Eileen in the equipment room, who was hiding here and had fallen asleep. They just had to make the love interest the only survivor. That's not very original. But Eileen fills Hayao in and confirms that there's a monster on the ship that attacked them. She's injured her legs, so they decide to send her back to the Corona first on the Comet's transport shuttle. It can only hold one person, so Hayao will follow soon after on the shuttle he came here on. While she's leaving, she tells Hayao, "Bring the late," and he can't make out what she said after that. But first we use the lifeform sensor to find out that the monster is in the storage room on the 5th floor, and then use the control panel with the captain's card here to jettison that section of the ship. Then Hayao heads to Eileen's room to figure out what she wanted him to bring. It's a futuristic electric keyboard that Hayao got her as a present, called a Laseron, or whatever. Finally, before evacuating, Hayao makes a stop at the weapons room where he can choose to take one weapon. Make sure to pick the freeze ray. With all that completed, Hayao heads back to the Corona for the second half of the game, where we'll have to replace Disc 2 with Disc 3. For the second half, the cool hallway navigation interface is gone, and the game becomes more of a standard command-based graphic adventure. This part involves a lot of moving back and forth between the few rooms on the ship, before the game lets you finally discover something new and progress. Hayao and Eileen regroup with the crew of the Corona, but it doesn't take long before an alarm sounds, and of course the creature has somehow come aboard the Corona. They ascertain that it must have turned into its goo form again and snuck through the doorway of one of the two transport shuttles. The first character to be attacked is Hoka. Hayao shoots it with the freeze ray, forcing it to retreat, but it's too late for Hoka. While wandering around afterward, one thing Hayao notices is that Eileen's cassette tape from earlier has been inserted into the ship's PA system, and that it's been damaged. Again, I promise this will be important later. Next to be killed is Carson, while Captain Murakov fends off the creature. When the monster runs away, the characters notice that Eileen's cassette tape, which was playing on the ship's PA system, suddenly stops and a different song begins to play. The remaining three characters lock themselves into the cockpit and decide to seal the edges of the doorway with ceramic tape so the creature can't ooze its way in. Hayao has to go find the tape. While searching for it, he finds Eileen's cassette tape again and notices this time it's lying broken on the floor. But anyway, he finds the ceramic tape in the area below the machine room where he's attacked by the monster, but he activates the elevator, causing it to fall below. He takes this chance to escape and returns to the cockpit where he tapes up the door. There's a lot of conversation here before the monster manages to ooze its way in. Guess the tape wasn't strong enough. The captain distracts it, allowing only Hayao and Eileen to escape. They take refuge in the crew's hibernation capsules, and Hayao can choose Carson's capsule, which has a computer communication system in it. There, the monster, who is a lot more intelligent than they thought, decides to finally try communicating with the humans. It speaks in a mixture of Portuguese, Italian, German, Chinese, English, and Russian, the mother tongues of its 6 victims. It must have learned their languages when it stole their genetic material by stabbing them in the neck. Foji translates, and Hayao and the monster are able to have a conversation. The monster tells us that its species lacks a planet to inhabit, and hopped aboard Halley's Comet in order to find one. Earth seems to be the perfect new home, but the monster doesn't think its species can coexist with humans, and plans to exterminate them when it gets there. The creature has locked itself in the cockpit, and Hayao needs to bargain with the creature in order to lure it out. He eventually succeeds by telling the creature that he's carrying an explosive device capable of destroying the entire ship. Hayao heads to the airlock, where Foji gives Hayao a quick quiz regarding all the clues the game has given us so far regarding the monster's weakness. In the end, the clues lead to the conclusion that the monster can't stand the song that's on Eileen's cassette tape. Yep, he's weak against that one specific melody, the game's theme music. How convenient. And so when the monster comes for Hayao, he uses the laseron. Here you use the keyboard to press the keys, and you have to figure out the correct notes of the melody. Luckily, the game lets you press spacebar anytime before playing the 8th and final note in order to start over and try again. Play the right notes and the monster loses all control. The consciousnesses of the 6 dead characters within the monster take over and are able to communicate telepathically. They explain a few unanswered questions, like the fact that the monster was hostile because of the human DNA it had stolen. Since humans are a warring species at heart, according to the game, the monster took on that trait. Anyway, they control the monster and bring it aboard one of the shuttles to send it to the depths of space. Each of them says one last goodbye as the shuttle heads away. Balkos, of course, says he wishes he could have eaten just one more hamburger. In the end, wouldn't you know it, the hero and the love interest are the only ones left alive, but they'll return to Jesus and make sure that mankind is ready for the next time Halley's Comet approaches in 2137. Hayao shuts off Foji so that they can have some time alone, but the final screen before the end is a message to the player from Foji. He says his battery is about to go dead and that he will lose his temporary memory. Before Hayao shut him off, he wanted to tell him that at the end, Captain Mirakov told him that the next time the creature comes, the melody probably won't work anymore. Oh well, the end. We'll see how that works out in Jesus 2, which was released much later in 1991.
Jesus, 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 why don't we just shut off the light?
Jesus was ported to the PC-88's rival machines, the FM7 and the X1. These versions are really the same as the PC-88 version, with no surprises. Probably the biggest difference I noticed is that the X1 version doesn't have sound effects when the characters are speaking. That same year, the MSX2 version was also released. While usually PC-88 graphics need to be redrawn for the MSX, here they managed to make the original graphics work without any major changes. Thus, the MSX2 port is also very similar to the original. The biggest difference is that the music is PSG instead of FM, and like the X1 version, they got rid of the speaking sound effects for the dialogue. It wasn't until a couple years later, in 1989, that the game was ported to the Nintendo Famicom by Chunsoft, the same company that developed the Dragon Quest games for the Famicom. For this one, they added a subtitle, Kyofu no Biomonster, which means terrifying biomonster. I guess they figured the name Jesus didn't describe the game well enough. In this one, they changed Foji from a wearable device into a cute little robot. Some scenes were censored or removed, but overall I think they did a really good job here. They translated the graphics over pretty well, and the music not only sounds good, but it actually plays in the background through most of the game. And as mentioned in the beginning of this video, this is the only version which currently has an English patch. Jesus was a pretty decent adventure game for 1987. The tense, dark mood of the game was brought to life in a way that was still pretty uncommon for its time. And having played Snatcher on the PC-88, it makes perfect sense to me to learn that Hideo Kojima was inspired by Jesus. Unlike Snatcher though, Jesus uses music as a major theme of the game, at least near the ending. So you would expect that the game has a great soundtrack by Sugiyama. The manual even suggests hooking your PC-88 up to a boombox with an auxiliary input so you can really enjoy the game's sounds. But it's mostly a quiet game with just some incidental music here and there. There are a couple of nice sounding tunes like the memorable main theme, but the arrangements, done probably by Yasuhiro Taguchi, also sound a bit sparse, using really old sounding FM sounds even for 1987. Ys 1 would put the soundtrack of Jesus to shame just 3 months later. The Jesus 2 soundtrack is much better. Since it's 4 years newer and uses the soundboard too, that probably should be no surprise. But did you know that Jesus 1's main theme has lyrics? They were written by the game's main creator, Koji Miya, and appear at the end of the manual. No recording was ever released on a CD or anything like that though. So let's see here. 青い時は続くただ終わりない夢 Beauty and the Thanks for watching this episode of PC-88 Paradise. I see a whole bunch of awesome people's names scrolling by on the screen right now. Jesus, is that a lot of awesome people. But you're pretty awesome too, you know, for watching this video. Remember to like and comment, and I'll see you all next time.